Hello, welcome to today's webcast. We are going to give folks 2 more minutes to dial in, so we'll get started in just a couple more minutes. All right, it's 10:02. Let's get started. First, a couple of housekeeping notes. If you want captions during this webinar, we do have live captioning. So you should see a link at the bottom of the screen. You can click on that, or if you'd like, it's also in the email we sent out yesterday, so you can get the captioning link there too. If you have questions at any time during this webinar, please use the Ask a Question tab in the BrightTalk player. We will do a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so don't worry if we don't get to them right away. We're going to just reserve some time for questions at the end, and we'll answer them all at once. And at the end of the webinar, please do take a moment to rate this presentation and give us feedback. It's super helpful to us to kind of figure out what kind of content is useful in the future. So yeah, please do rate us, give us feedback. And if you have any technical difficulties at all, there is a support for viewers link at the bottom of the page, so you can click that to get support, if you need AV assistance or anything like that. Finally, a recorded version of this presentation is going to be available at the same URL after we wrap up. So if you want to share this with your friends or colleagues, you hear something that's interesting that you want to share with your team, don't worry, it'll all be recorded and be available after the fact. So check that out if you want. All right, great. This is part of a 5-webinar series, the Honeycomb Learn series, and the goal of this series is to break how to make observability happen into bite-sized chunks. We have previously covered topics like instrumentation, ongoing performance optimization, incident response, identifying outliers and anomalies, and then this is going to be episode 5, Never Alone on Call. And in this episode, we're specifically going to be focusing on team collaboration, curated learning, and we're going to be kind of taking a deep dive into how Honeycomb handles knowledge sharing within our on-call rotation. And all of this is part of the larger story of how we build a culture of observability within our team. I am very lucky today to be joined by 2 of Honeycomb's finest engineers. My name is Emily Nakashima. I'm the Director of Engineering at Honeycomb. I manage the engineering and design teams, and I will let Allison and Ben tell you a little bit about themselves. Allison, why don't we start with you? How did you get to Honeycomb? What do you work on? What was your background before here?
Yeah, hi, I'm Allison Van Hardenberg. My background before coming to Honeycomb was as a front-end engineer at a small startup. And prior to joining Honeycomb, I've never been on call, so that was a new experience for me coming to Honeycomb.
Awesome. And Ben, how about you? You have a bit of a different background than Allison. What brought you to Honeycomb, and what did you do before here?
My name is Ben Hartshorn. I've been an on-call engineer for quite a while now. My background is in operations, and I've been on call at basically every technical job I've had, from small startups like Simply Hired and Parse to large organizations like Wikimedia and Facebook. Here at Honeycomb, I am working on the full stack, from the front end, the back end storage, the ingestion, API, client libraries, and of course, on call.
Fantastic. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I was so excited that Allison and Ben could both join for this, because they are two people who are both fantastic engineers and are like really valuable people to have in our on-call rotation, and they come from super different backgrounds. So I think that's part of what I'm so excited to talk about today. Just to give you a little overview of how on-call works for us, because I know that word can mean, or words can mean different things at different places. At Honeycomb, we have an on-call rotation that lasts for 2 weeks. So for the first week, you are the secondary on-call. You are the backup for the primary on-call engineer. So pages can escalate to you if primary on-call misses a page. For the most part, secondary on-call week is pretty chill unless you're ramping up, and then you're pretty likely to use that time to kind of watch what the primary on-call is doing, to get oriented, see what issues are happening. You are also the first line of escalation for primary on-call. So if they just get too busy or need a hand, they're most likely to pull you in first before grabbing someone else on the team. After that first week, in that second week, you'll make the transition to being primary on-call yourself. Another engineer will become your secondary, and then then you're the first line of defense. And then at the end of each week, we have an on-call handoff meeting where we discuss whatever issues came up during the week, walk through our action items, and make sure that someone is on point to take care of any potential mitigations, and just sort of use that meeting to share context about what happened during the week and what we could do to get better. Ben, since you have so much on-call experience and you are my on-call expert, it would be great if you could tell us a little bit about how on-call at Honeycomb and on-call other places that you've been before.
Sure thing. So on-call, most of the places I've been has been driven by alerting, and there will always be some alerts that come through that trigger on-call work. But there's an interesting thing about Honeycomb's on-call. The entire engineering staff is on-call. Most of the organizations I've worked at, and this is part of the evolution of our industry too, there is an ops team. The ops team is the group of people responsible for production, and when things come up, they might call in engineers for help, but it was a pretty clear separation. The industry is moving towards DevOps. The ops teams are learning how to build software and automate all of their processes. The development teams are learning about operations and what it means to run software in production. And that the fact that there isn't this divide has really changed the way on-call works. I've always been part of software development in a way that that the product will be built and then we'll try and run it, and inevitably there will be challenges, and folks will say, no, you didn't pull in ops early enough. This isn't able to be run because you didn't ask the ops team, or ops will complain, this isn't well instrumented. There's no way for me to run this, and this characteristic of there being two separate groups that don't really talk makes it difficult to run software in production. Having the engineering team be the ones that are also on call and running it in production gives an immediate feedback loop, and so improves the way that we can build software, as well as shortening the response for any of these problems that come up. On call at Honeycomb is not about triaging problems and then finding somebody else to fix them. Because it's the engineering team that's on call, when problems come up, we just fix them. And so the feedback cycle of getting of identifying a problem, finding a fix, pushing it back out is very fast. And I don't mean that on call has to fix all problems. We can certainly escalate to the rest of the team if we hit something that's more challenging or will take longer, or an area of the stack that we don't know so well. But most of the on-call tickets that come up are handled by the on-call rather than them being just a point to identify a problem and then pass it off to somebody else. And that's a really big difference, and has made on-call just way more fun.
Perfect, thanks, Ben. Yeah, I know I've definitely worked in places where we're always trying to find that right moment to hand off things between software and the ops team, or the right moment to loop them in, and I feel like you never ever find it. So it does feel really, really different to just have both of those teams be one and the same from the start. Allison, I'm curious to hear from you, coming from the perspective of someone who was doing more like core software engineering work and not on-call in the past. Has going on call changed the way you think about writing software, about how you think about your job as a software engineer?
Yeah, it has. I was definitely a little bit nervous about joining the Oncall Rotation when I came to Honeycomb, but it's been great for me. It's really changed the way that even my career path, like the way I think about my career, is different. It's given me the opportunity to learn more of those opsy skills, like SSHing into a different host, or even going like instrument my code. And because I know that I'm going to be on call and have to support the code that I'm writing, I'm more likely to think about the instrumentation as I'm writing the code. And it lets me instrument it in development and see how it's working. And then as I push that code to production, I can support it as it goes live and see my code roll out and how it's working, even before I just let the issues roll over to on-call.
Yeah, having that feedback loop between development and production, I totally agree that it changed the way I thought about like what hooks I would put into my code at the time I was writing it. That makes complete sense. I was wondering if you could also tell us a little bit about exactly what on-call does at Honeycomb, because I know, some places you're really just kind of responding to alerts, about CPU or latency. And I think that for us, we maybe cover a broader territory than some folks might in the rotation. So can you tell us a little bit about what you might do during a week on call?
Yeah, when we're on call at Honeycomb, we're responsible for so many different things, different types of tickets. Primarily, like, we really pay attention to any alerts that come in. So we might have a Slack trigger that comes in, or a PagerDuty alert. When those comes in, and it really like a call for your attention. So it might be like message queue delays or disk space alerts, and those are more the like typical OPSI roles that I would imagine on-call handles. But as an on-call engineer, you're also responsible for looking into user-generated errors, something that's normally logged via something like log.error, or a JavaScript error that might come up. But we're also responsible for being the first line of defense for triaging customer bugs and requests. For example, a customer has found a bug in one of our SDKs. And because we're all software engineers, when those requests come in, we fix them and roll out a fix, and they get resolved really, really quite quickly.
Thanks. Yeah, you can definitely see it can really change a lot from week to week. I think oftentimes you're on call and you find you're really focusing in one area of the code base or of our infrastructure, and the next time you're on call, it'll completely change. So you do really get a good tour of all of Honeycomb engineering, for better or for worse. I wanted to just sort of quickly walk through what that looks like in practice and how we kind of collaborate together when we're on call. So I have a really quick demo that I kind of wanted to walk through, or just sort of, this is kind of a story of how we might respond to an incident together. So, and I should just say for this part, and there's going to be a lot of like text and images on screen. If you want to, you can actually expand the BrightTalk player to kind of zoom in on the images a little bit. So, go ahead and do that if you want to. For us, on-call tends to get involved via one of two channels. So either a customer reports a problem to us directly via one of our support channels, which might be intercom or email or a customer Slack, or we get an alert. And I would say it's about 50-50 whether things are alert-driven or customer report-driven. So here's an example of us getting an alert that we want to go investigate. An engineer on our team, Doug, has just finished doing a big refactor of a piece of software we call Hound Usage, and he set up this nice alert, or in Honeycomb speak, we call them triggers, to report if the error rate for Hound usage is higher than what we'd expect. And so looking at this alert, it looks like we've seen 131 errors in the last 10 minutes, which is over the expected threshold. And I should say, hound usage is part of how we move data from primary storage to secondary storage. And just because it's part of the workflow we use to handle customer events, we want to look pretty closely at it if anything unexpected happens. So the trigger message kind of has all the usual things you'd expect in an alert. There's a description of what went wrong, how to think about this alert, a link to a board, kind of like a dashboard, so that's going to have some query results on it with relevant queries. And then there's a link to a playbook that Doug just wrote. And of course, you can see Elena down at the bottom going, ooh, great playbook, thanks for adding that. So you see Doug and Elena discuss the alert. Elena is our primary on-call for the week, so she's in there looking at it right away. They decide together that it's important but not urgent, and so they agree that they're going to take a look at it together when Doug gets in from his commute. So I, as someone else on the team, see this alert a few hours later. I want to know what happened, see if everything got resolved okay, see if I can help. So the first thing I'm going to do is click that query view graph link in the trigger, which is going to take me to the query that we ran to generate that alert. So if I click that link, I can come look at this query myself and rerun the query. It looks like that error rate has gone down, so I'm a little bit less worried, but I still do want to know what's going on. So here's the cool thing. If you look at those little icons over on the right side, one of those is the query history icon. So I can see both, or the middle one is query history, the lower one is team history. So I can see both the queries that I've run and the queries that my teammates have run if I click those. And now you'll see over in that right sidebar, I can see that Doug got off his ferry trip. He and Elena sat down together. They started running some queries to investigate what was cool. Right off the bat, I can see that other people on my team already started investigating this. I can see what they were thinking about, what questions they were asking. And the cool thing to mention that some people don't know, we do save query results forever. So once you run a query, we cache all the graphs in S3, so you can always look at old graphs again in an instant. So this is cool if you have a data set with small retention, relatively, it's only got a couple days of retention. If you want to go back and look at what happened during an incident, you'll always be able to reload those graphs, which is a nice feature. So if I click into one of the first queries that Doug ran, that's a group by name. I can see that he's trying to figure out exactly which errors happened. The errors, updating metadata, you can see that table shows you the breakdown of the different types of errors. The metadata ones I'm not as concerned about because I know we can always regenerate that metadata later from the data. The rollout errors I am a little concerned about. That means that there was potentially a failure trying to move this data out to S3. So let's do a group by error message to see what the individual error types are and see if we can get a little more information about what went wrong. Okay, so that's really interesting. Down at the bottom, we can see that we've got that SQL error, not what I expected. And then from there, I'm going to group by data set because I want to know, was this just one customer's data that was affected or is this a widespread problem? And, looking at that count in the table, it does look like the bulk of those errors are just happening to one data set. So, I flip back over to Slack. It looks like our team went and did some digging in our admin panel to figure out, whose data set was that, what's going on with it. We find some bad data that looks like it's causing an issue, and then they're going to manually clean that up. And then, of course, going back to Slack, I can see that my team is already on top of it. So Elena's checking in with our customer support team, letting them know what happened, letting them know the issue was resolved and how we resolved it. And Doug is updating the alert to make sure we still think the threshold is reasonable. And of course, for me as a manager or as someone else on the team, this is like the best case scenario. I've already learned a lot about this new hound usage code just by watching Doug and Elena work. So I know what questions he's asking, how he's thinking about it, what's normal, what isn't. And as I see my team work, I can see that they've got it covered. If they need an extra set of hands, I have context from watching them that I can jump in and help. But if they've got it handled, I've just sort of collected some knowledge in my head about this incident, and I can totally get out of the way, which is great. So that was a little overview of how a typical incident might play out at Honeycomb when we're on call. Finally, I think it's worth talking a little bit about how working this way has changed the way we think about engineering and how that impacts our business overall. What you were seeing in that demo is us using our observability tooling as a team to understand what our software is doing. And for us, that's all part of this larger culture around what we call software ownership. So we believe that the best software comes out of involving the team from idea all the way to production. We have the same engineers going through that whole cycle from planning, writing, testing, deploying, validating that things are successful in production, and then running their own software in an ongoing way after it's been shipped, and being responsible for continuous improvement to that software. The demo we just talked through was focused on incident response, but of course, in the software ownership model, we're not just responding to incidents. The same people that are catching those pages are also going to be doing ongoing development, doing performance optimization, and all these things I think work best when you can take the same tool chain and apply it to each of those phases. So this means for us that our engineers are using Honeycomb to understand what they're building, sometimes even starting in development, using Honeycomb to verify that it's behaving correctly when it's rolled out. We're using it to respond to errors like what we just looked at. We're also using it for the optimization piece. I know a lot of people think about that as performance optimization, but for us it also includes product analytics. So making sure what we shipped is being used the way we expected it to, customers are successful in it the way we hope they will be. We really like to use Honeycomb to see exactly what customers are doing with the product, and that often helps us design and plan for future improvements. And this model and using a shared tool throughout the various steps allows us to have a faster iteration cycle in the development process, which is what we really care about. Being able to move quickly but make sure we're shipping the right things. I think a lot of people hear about putting all engineers on call and really have a lot of questions about that. I think this is the thing that we take to conferences, and people kind of give us the most concerned looks or raised eyebrows. I think that for us, this is one of the ways we foster software ownership on our team, but we know that it doesn't necessarily work in every organization. Not every organization is ready to jump into this. And so a lot of people have asked questions about how we do this. So just a couple of caveats I would say. We don't put all engineers on call on their first day or even in their first month. So this is the culmination of a process that begins during onboarding, and it continues. You should feel like you're continuing to learn more about our systems and how to do on-call well throughout your tenure as an engineer at Honeycomb. We also don't have the belief that the on-call person should be able to fix everything. They're just the first line of defense. And it's really important to us to keep that kind of emotional and a team barrier to escalating something really, really low. You should never feel shame or embarrassment about having to ask for help or having to ask questions. And we try to make sure that you have your secondary right there, but it's really common to see other engineers around just jump in to help if they see something go wrong and they feel like they have a lot of context about it. I think
one of my favorite parts, if I can jump in for a sec, Emily, one of my favorite parts of the onboarding experience, you mentioned, we don't put engineers on call on their first day, but when it does come to be time to help a new engineer ramp up, one of the things that we do is an architecture overview. This is not uncommon. The thing that I like about it is that the previously newest engineer is going to be the one that gives the architecture overview, and most of the team comes. So it gets to serve as both a way for relatively new engineers to go over this whole infrastructure again to make sure that they have everything right, talk through it as a way of cementing that understanding, and then also provide an opportunity for everybody on the team to see, what things are new or what's changed, as well as the people that have been there for a while longer to talk a little bit about any questions that might come up.
I also really love that architecture meeting. When I gave it as the most recent hire, it made me feel like I had ownership and like a stake in the team. Even though I was relatively new, I still had so much knowledge to contribute. And I really love that the engineers who've been at Honeycomb for a longer time will join, and they add a lot of funny color commentary. It's kind of like, I don't know, it just brings everybody together. It's really great.
And the thing that's hilarious to me is how often the most senior engineers come into that meeting and still learn something new. We have a few people who join just because they love the fun of sitting in that meeting. But, even Toshak, who's, employee number 2, will often go, oh, I didn't know that during the meeting. So I love that it really emphasizes that, you know, we're all continuously learning, which is, I think is really great.
So even though I just started being on call when I joined Honeycomb and was really nervous about it, I still think it's been a really good thing for me, and it really helps individual engineers, but it also helps the team as a whole, and it helps us by democratizing the knowledge. For example, we don't want people to feel like there are only 2 experts on the team who solve everything. By putting everybody on call, it makes the team more resilient. At the old company I worked, we would only have 1 or 2 power users who knew how to use our instrumentation, and then when things broke, nobody really knew how to fix it, and there was a huge scramble, a lot of stress, a lot of panic. It also levels the playing field between junior and senior engineers, and even people with different sets of knowledge. It allows people to ask questions and question those established practices. For example, somebody might ask, is the current caching strategy killing our database? That's not something I would think to ask if I was on call, because my focus tends to be more front-endy. But having those different players be on call gives us a more well-rounded set of practices. And then when different team members go on call, they notice holes in the documentation that people who have been doing the same thing over and over and over again, they don't notice. When new people join the rotation, they then improve the docs and help other people get up to speed more quickly.
You know, I'm a little embarrassed to admit it, but I think I suffer from that last bit quite a bit. I'm particularly bad at leaving holes in documentation, just as a side effect of having been on call for 15 years and having done a lot of these processes over and over and over again. They're air quotes obvious. They're not obvious. So being on call with another engineer, especially as we work on some things together, whether I've escalated to my secondary or I am secondary, getting to fill in some of those holes by seeing those same processes through another set of eyes is a fantastic way of working together to make the whole team better.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned different levels of experience on call, and I think there's also a component of it that is different engineering disciplines. You know, Allison, I think, you know, is on the senior end for front-end development at Honeycomb, and Ben is definitely, you know, on the senior end for, you know, ops and systems kinds of things. But, you know, it might be that if Ben is on call and there's a JavaScript issue that comes up, just because it's not his, you know, favorite area of software engineering or the area where he spent the most time, he still might have to escalate or pull in someone else for help. So I like that it feels like it really levels the playing field, that everyone has to potentially learn something new to be successful on call, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I'm always super grateful for having the other engineers out there that I'm just so comfortable pinging them and asking them questions, and it's great to not be alone on call.
I think one of the important things that I don't want to get lost here is that we wouldn't do any of this if we didn't think it was the right thing for our customers and for Honeycomb, the business. I think that there is a component of it for us that is about retaining people on the engineering team, and we think that this way is a good way of building if you're someone who likes to understand the whole process, likes to understand the impact of your work, but we also think it's the right thing to do for our customers and for the product, because working this way means that we can often resolve customer issues much more quickly than we could if we were using a more traditional kind of, you know, waterfall model of handing things off between teams. Oftentimes, if customers report a bug, it means that things are resolved in minutes or hours instead of days. And it reduces, you know, communication hoops both for customers and for our internal teams. You know I used to work in a more traditional model, and you know, so often we would just kick tickets back to the customer and say, you know, like, we can't reproduce this, give us steps to reproduce. And, you know, with the tools we have now, being able to ask the right questions, we can often avoid that entirely. Customer will report a problem, we'll go, oh yeah, we can see that and fix it. And I think the most gratifying feedback we hear that makes us know that this is working for other people too is hearing from customers who have switched from kind of the prior generation of tools, from trying to do this sort of debugging with APM tools or just with logs, to using Honeycomb for their production issues, and telling us, you know, we immediately found something that we couldn't have solved with our APM, or, you know, we solved our first production problem within minutes. You know, those kinds of things are really common and help us know that we're on the right track and we really are getting what we want out of our tools. And the goal for us, like I said, is to spend less time reacting to large production issues and have more time to invest in, these specific customer issues, making customers happy, and also spend more time on that forward-looking product work so we can, keep improving the product and making it better for everyone.
Bringing this back to the customer, if I can add in, Emily, it's almost either a side effect or perhaps part of the purpose of the DevOps movement, if you will. For many of the years I was in operations, I never used the product that I was responsible for maintaining. The work that I was doing was making sure all of the services were running and everything was smooth, and it didn't actually matter what the service was. And so there was one point when I was like, you know what, I need to switch jobs, and I've never supported a product that I actually used. One thing about the engineering team being on call is that it's the same team that's building these features that's then supporting them. So that disconnect of, I'm just making sure the servers run, I'm just making sure the software runs, from, I'm using this feature, I understand why this feature is here, I understand why this service is here. It brings it together in a way that lets us more easily pull the work that we're doing directly back to customers in a way that's very satisfying.
Yeah, totally. That definitely, tying it into the larger DevOps trend is so important. Like, I don't want people to miss that connection, because I think that, there was, this is really almost the dream of that movement, broken down into kind of more actionable steps, which I really like. Cool. So that was the end of our kind of presentation portion. Before we take questions, a little bit of wrap-up information. Like we said, there's going to be a recording of this webinar that's going to be sent out soon, so please do feel free to share it with your friends and colleagues if you want to. For more information about how to get started, we will send the attachments that you see here in an upcoming email, so you'll be able to check out Allison and Elena on our team about the culture of observability, so you can look at the deck from that, and that goes into a little more depth about our on-call process and culture. We have an observability e-guide series, so achieving observability, observability for developers, guide to distributed tracing. So again, if you want to go a little more in depth, you'll find those at this link or on the resources page of our website. If you do want to demo Honeycomb and kind of play around with the things that we walked through today in the demo, you can do some of that on our play site, play.honeycomb.io, and you can kind of use the UI and try to debug a real production issue. And of course, if you want to trial Honeycomb or request a demo, you can do that on our website too. Cool. All right, so questions. Let's see, someone asked, what is Hound usage? Allison, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, Hound usage is our way of moving our data from our primary storage to our secondary storage, and we back things up to S3 using it, so it runs on a cron job and backs up our data.
It's one of those things that has charmingly outgrown its name. So it used to just be about measuring how much data we were using, and now it's this crucial piece of our infrastructure. But I guess old names die hard. All right, we have, who is ultimately responsible for writing and maintaining, updating the playbook for on-call? Oh gosh, that's a great question. I don't know that we're particularly good at playbooks right now. Ben, what's your take on that?
So for any given service, the team that is building the service goes through an evolution. First, they're writing everything, and then it gets into our staging or our dog fooding environment. And generally, the team that is building that service is watching it closely, learning about how it's running in a high traffic environment, and writing documentation about what sort of edges it exposes and how to understand them, what instrumentation is available and how to read that. And then there's a phase that is the difficult one, where this team it gives up control of their special creation, and the entire engineering team is then responsible for this service going forward. And that allows the team to dissolve and the individual engineers to move on to other projects. So at least part of that process is that when any new service is stood up, there has to be some copy written about how it works and what it's doing and how to interact with it. And that's like predictive documentation, right? That's the things that you think people are going to want to know when they're trying to understand your service, and it's never more than 50% of what folks need. So that document turns into an evolving and living set of tips, tricks, instructions, specific responses, and so on. Really through the hands of all of the different on-call engineers that come across it, find that the problem that they're trying to solve is either well answered, poorly answered, or not answered at all, and then improving that documentation. So phrasing it, who is ultimately responsible for the documentation, for updating the playbooks? It's sort of everyone, but not in the squishy when everyone's responsible, no one's responsible, in that the team that creates a service definitely starts the process. And then part of being on call is ensuring that the operation of the service can continue. Now, some of the issues that are resolved, as you resolve them, you feed that back into the documentation. Other issues that are resolved, you feed that back into the code so that issue doesn't happen again. So it's sort of a process that has a number of different options. But I think that the closest answer to who's ultimately responsible for maintaining it and updating it, those are the people using it, namely the on-call engineer, which is everybody through rotation. Is that in line with what you see, Emily?
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing I would add is that I think that, kind of taking the software ownership approach incentivizes people to write the right amount of on-call documentation. I think that, if you write enough of a playbook that people can successfully debug and operate the software, it means that fewer things will be escalated back to you, the person who originally wrote the software. And I think the nicest version of this typically ends up being a relatively short playbook and then a really nice board that kind of gives you a starting point with queries that you might run to try and debug something. I think that's what I've seen work best in practice. I think the reality is probably that most people on our team would like a little bit more documentation than we have now, but we're getting there step by step.
Along with wanting a little bit more time and a few more employees and
yeah, that's the constant
it's a
state. I think
state.
if you have enough documentation, you've probably written too much. All right, we've got, when hiring new engineers, how do you talk about on-call? The system is so different than anywhere I've worked. How do you get folks on board to participating this way? That is a great question. Allison, what made you not run screaming from the idea of being put on call?
I had a firm promise that I would never be just by myself. The reason that I didn't run screaming away was knowing that I was just kind of the first line of defense, and that I had a whole team backing me up. Because everybody is on call, everybody has experience doing this, and knowing that it's okay and expected to escalate, for me to escalate an issue when I don't know how to solve that issue or I've never seen something like that before, it makes it feel safe to be on call. Also, we don't get paged very much in the middle of the night. Most of our issues tend to be during the working hours because we are a bit more proactive with our response to things.
Yeah, that's a great point.
That's a good point, and I think it's a direct side effect of the way that we run these things. Nobody likes getting woken up in the middle of the night, and developing software in a way to ensure that it has the right fallbacks, it has the right scaling properties, and so on, is a hugely important part of that process.
Absolutely. All right, we've got one last question, it looks like, which is what percentage of the team should be fully proficient at handling on-call P1 issues? Oh gosh, that's a really sticky one. Allison and Ben, either of you feel compelled to take a guess at that? The answer feels real squishy just because, like I said, we have all those different types of P1 issues, and so there really is not one engineer who can handle every single P1 issue that comes up. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd almost say 100% and 0%. Like, we should all know how we should handle P1 issues, whether or not we know how to resolve them. We should all know the escalation patterns and where to look for the runbooks. But nobody is expected to be fully proficient in handling all the P1 issues on their own.
That's a great way of putting it. I think that, go ahead.
We are still a small company, and when really severe issues show up, when I'm not going to say when the site is down, but when there are major features that are not working correctly, there are definitely within the engineering organization teams of people that are helpful for managing different aspects of the infrastructure. We sort of split a little bit into a platform team and a product team. So depending on where it goes, escalation is an expected part of being on call. So especially for the folks that are more recently on call, escalation happens more often. For the folks that have been on call for a long time, escalation still happens. And it's a way of ensuring that you understand when is this really a severe issue and how can we resolve it most effectively, and bring in the right people necessary to make sure that happens. When things are really on fire, we'll send Slack pings or text messages or call people up on the phone and say, yes, we need some help. And I think that's actually just fine. Trying to believe that we can handle everything on our own is a way of making it so that you reinforce that idea that a few people handle everything. So yeah, not everybody handles everything, and that's a way of making sure that the whole team can handle everything.
Yeah, I really, really like that framing. I think maybe it's worth emphasizing that I think the most important trait to be successful on call at Honeycomb is just having good judgment and being a clear communicator, because so often what you're doing is just making the call of, can I handle this myself, or do I need to ask for help? And that is sometimes a harder problem than being able to understand the actual technical issue that you're digging into. Cool. Well, that is all the time we have for questions. If you have any more questions, please do feel free to reach out to us through our website. There's that little chat bubble in the lower right-hand corner, or respond to any of the webinar emails. We're happy to help, or find the right resources for you. And just a reminder again that we love feedback, so please do tell us how we did using the Rate This tab below the player. And like I said, this video will be available on demand soon at this URL. We'll send you an email when it's available. Please do check out those resources we'll send out if you want to go more in depth in any of this content. There's a lot of good stuff, especially in those ebooks and e-guides that we have. All right. Well, thank you so much, Allison and Ben, for joining me today, and thanks for everyone who took the time to listen in. We'll see you next time.